Hey friends, I'm going to create a 2 video series course which will teach you how to create a full stack application. We are going to name that application as a task manager app or a to do app. Now, to create this full stack application, what we are going to do is we are going to use Hasura for our APIs and Authorizer for authentication and authorization. So this will eliminate writing backend at all. And yes, without writing backend also, you will be able to create a secure backend layer which will have everything you need for your front end application. So part 1 will cover how to configure this service, how to deploy this service. We are going to use Railway.app to deploy Hasura and Authorizer. Both of this product have their open source version, so we are going to deploy that, and we are going to connect them with our Postgres database, and we will define the databases required for task manager application. And in the part 2, what we will do is we will create a React application. So let's get started with our part 1. All we have to do is go to railway.app, sign up there, and we have to create a new project. What we want to do is we want to deploy a template. So we want to deploy authorizer template, which is used for authentication and authorization. And I'm going to deploy it under a repository called Fullstack app to do demo. Okay, you can also deploy it as a private repository, but I'm going to put it under public. So what this template does is it deploys authorizer instance, and it also installs Postgres and Redis for you. Let's wait while this application is getting deployed. You can also check the docs of Authorizer, and you will find how to use it with Hasura. So if you go to integration sections, we have a documentation on how you can use this with Hasura, and you can eliminate writing backend at all. So let's go back to Railway and check if this is deployed. So as you can see, authorizer is deployed. We have Postgres and we have Redis. Okay. Now next, what we need is we need to deploy Hasura as well, right? For that, I will click new button. I will go to GitHub repo. I have a repo which has Hasura image. Okay. So Hasura Railway. Yeah, that is the right. And as you can see, Hasura Railway is also deployed under this project. We need to configure few environment variables for sure. So yes, we need to configure database URL. We need to configure PG database. We need to configure PG password, because Hasura also uses the same database, right? So, and PG port. Now, once these environment variables are given to Hasura, it will try to rebuild things. So let's wait while it is rebuilding it. We can go to settings. We can also generate domain for Hasura. It's great. So domain is also generated. And if we check the deployments, you will see that we have Hasura URL, which is still getting assigned. In the meanwhile, let's open our authorizer URL. So as you can see, authorizer is up and running. What we have to do is we have to configure a secret for admin. So let me configure that. And once this is configured, you will see that you get bunch of options to configure your social media logins. You get your client secret and IDs. You can configure the roles. These are the default roles. You can configure how to use JWT secrets. You can, configure session storage, email, domain whitelisting. You can use organization information to be shown on the default login page that you get with authorizer. You can also configure access token. You can configure bunch of features. You get to see what all users are there for your platform. You get configure webhooks for various events. Also, you can configure email templates. So what we are interested in is configuring our JWT secret. So you can copy this JWT public key and use that with Hasura, right? So that every request that we make to Hasura is an authorized request. Now Hasura has this environment variable which will allow you to configure your JWT secrets or public key, using which they can authorize the incoming JWT token. So let's first see whether the Hasura domain is up and running or not. So yes, Hasura domain is up and running. As you can see, the console is there, right? um, so now what we need to do is we can go to our documentation, and we will see that once our console is launched, what we need to do is we need to copy this Hasura graphical JWT secret, and we need to configure that with Hasura instance. So I'll be creating a new variable called Hasura graphical JWT secret. And what you have to do is you can go to JWT secret section of Authorizer, copy as a JSON config, and all you have to do is paste it over here and add. Alright, now this will redeploy your instance. So let's wait for a moment. Okay, so as you can see, it throws me one error that I haven't configured Hasura admin secret, which is basically a secret used to uh, open the console that we saw from Hasura. So I can quickly do that. We can go to variable section, we can add a new variable to admin secret, and I can give any secret over here. So let's call it min123. All right, now it has scheduled and another redeploy. So we will wait for this another deployment to be up and running. So yes, this new deployment is up and running. Let's try to open that, and it still shows server errors. So what we need to do is again check the deploy log. It says it's up and running. So yeah, as soon as I reload this, it is asking me to enter the admin secret. Now I can enter the same, and as you can see, once I enter that secret, then only I can access the data. So now I go to data again, and I can just say reload the database. So data source was reloaded correctly, right? And if we open the public database, right, you will see that we have this public information, and we have all these tables that are created by authorizer. Now if we track all these tables, it will create a GraphQL API for all of them. So let's do that. All right, so now that we have our Hasura and authorizer up and running on Railway, all we need to do is create a database for managing our to-do application. So what we need is a table called to-do, right? And user table is already there, so that's done by authorizer and it's taken care by authorizer. We don't need to do anything about it. All we need is to-do table. So let's go ahead and create a schema for that. Okay, now I will name that table as to do. I will use frequently used column, UUID, created at, updated at, to do name. Now that will be string or text. Then is completed or not, right? That will be a boolean, and user ID. So which user created this to do will be stored in user ID, and that will be text again. Okay, now we want to add a foreign key for user ID, right? So we have been using public schema. Under that we have authorizer user. So user ID of this table should refer to the ID of authorizer users, and we should have a cascading effect for update and delete. And let's add the table. Great, so our table is created. All we need is the APIs which are also there. So if you go ahead and now query to do's table, right? So to do ID, name, user ID, created at, update at, completed, you can get all this information for any to do, right? So that's how you create a table and you get the API out of the box using Hasura. Now, as I mentioned earlier, that you can secure this API by adding an authorization using Authorizer, right? So if you remember, we configured an environment variable called Hasura JWT secret, right? I can show you again that. So if we go to this Hasura deployment, you will see Hasura GraphQL JWT secret, which is nothing but a public key of authorizer, right? So any JWT token created by authorizer can be validated using Hasura with its public key. Great. Now we also want to make sure that only the user who creates a to-do can see his own to-dos. He cannot see the to-do of any other user, right? So for that, what we need to do in Hasura is we need to define some permissions, and permissions can be defined on a given role, right? So one thing is like, if you want to get a mix match of GraphQL, like if you want to track the user details from to do, then also you can do that. So if I enable this, right, if I track all the relationships, I can also get user information over here. So we have defined an object relationship, and you can see that I can get authorizer, user, email. So for every to do, I can fetch all the user detail as well if I need. But yeah, with admin access, you can pretty much query anything and everything. But what we want is, with user access, only the user who has created that to do should be able to access it, right? So for that, you can go to permission and you can define the role. Now this role can be mapped against your role in authorizer. Okay, so if you go to authorizer, you can go to roles section. You will see that we have a role called user. It can be any other role name as well, whatever your application needs. Okay, and we need to modify our JWT token. So whenever, let's say, authorizer generates a JWT token, it needs to add few claims from Hasura, right? Hasura is expecting few claims, then only they can validate a JWT token. So those claims are like Hasura user ID, X Hasura default role, and allowed roles. So I can just copy this function, go to the authorizer dashboard, and um, in access token, you will see something called custom scripts. Now there you can paste this function, save it. Okay. Now next time, whenever authorizer will generate a JWT token, it will have all these claims in it. All right. So now what we need to do is we need to create permissions for a role called user, right? So it should match the exact role name that we have. So over here, if I go to role section, we have a role called user. So let's define a role called user. Now they can create or insert a row item in to do table only if their user ID that they are sending in matches the X Hasura user ID in the JWT token, right? So then only they can insert all these items. Next, they can insert, or they can only select with let's keep it with same as insert, because your user ID should match as X Hasura user ID, and then only you can access all these fields. Okay, and same thing goes for update. We will have same check. Okay, all right, so that pretty much completes our backend for to do application. Isn't that simple? Like in 15 to 20 minutes you have your backend services up and ready, deployed, and you have configured just tables, and you get the APIs and security out of the box. That's amazing. That saves a lot of developer time, right? So just to verify whether what we have configured is working correctly or not, we get a built-in app with our authorizer instance. Okay, so what you have to do is you have to open that URL slash app, and you get a built-in login with whatever you have configured, right? So I will just sign up over here. have signed up and I will also be logged in, because the email verification is disabled on this instance. In order to do that, you need to configure your email provider, and then authorizer can send verification email, and based on the verification only, user will be able to access the application. But yeah, for now we have just email verification disabled and a basic sign up and running. Now what I want to do is I want to get the JWT token out of this, right? So what I need to do is I need to go to network section. Okay, I can check the GraphQL request. You will get an ID token over here. So you can copy the value. Okay, and you can also check whether those JWT claims are present in it or not. So if you go to jwt.io, okay, as you can see that Hasura roles is present, role is present, user ID is present, everything is there. So all we need is we need to copy this JWT token, and if we want to verify whether our APIs are working or not, we just need to disable this admin secret, add authorization header with the barrier token and our JWT. Okay, so this particular user don't have any to-dos, so let's create one to-do. For that we need to run the mutation, and the mutation that we want to run is add or insert to do, right? And objects, and in that we will set name as bring milk, let's say, is completed as false. Then we need to set user ID, right? So I can grab the user ID from here. We had that information, right? And let me put it over here. So that's the user ID. Do we need to configure any other field? No, that's more than enough, and we can get the affected rows out of it. Great. So one row is affected, that means one insert should have happened. Now using this barrier token only, let's try to grab the to-dos. Okay, and as you can see, I'm able to get this data. Okay, now if I want to verify whether as a different user I'm able to get this to do or not, what I need to do is I can just log out from here. Okay, I will sign up as a different user. So bob at yokmail.com. So as soon as you sign up, you have this session data available, right? So let's grab ID token from there. I will copy the value. Okay. Next, I will use that value instead of the JWT token of Lakan, right? And here, if you see, if I decode, it's a different user ID altogether, right? And now, if I try to run the same query, I get zero to-dos. So yes, that's how you get a secure API layer with a role-based access control out of the box. That's it for part 1. In part 2, we will see how we can use this Hasura URL and create a nice UI out of it, where we have a login screen for our application. Once the user is logged in, they are able to see the to-dos and they are able to create the to-do. Thank you everyone.